Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's always darkest before the dawn. These expressions were born from people who went through hell and survived. And not only survived, they thrived. These are people who, through their darkest times, have gained perspective and oftentimes become teachers and healers, able to bring their experience to help others heal. The wounded healer is a term that I learned thanks to today's guest, who's here to share his story with us. I'm Patrick Marano, and this is Queerly Us. He's an ecstatic spirituality coach. He hosts the YouTube channel Ecstatic Self. He's authored 2 books, hosts in-person retreats, and works with clients across the globe. He's currently in Washington, D.C. with his husband and pets. Please welcome to the show, Kaelan Strouse. Kaelan,
Hey, hey.
welcome to Queerly Us.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. I have actually been a fan of your YouTube channel for quite some time.
Oh, stop.
I think we started relatively around the same time-ish, but I remember early on, like coming across your channel and seeing the work you were doing and being very impressed by it and the conversations you were having and the way you were approaching sometimes taboo, sometimes controversial topics, and it served as an inspiration for me. So it's an honor to be here.
Oh my God. Well, so what first drew me into your channel was obviously the sort of spicy thumbnails, which got my attention, but the content is why I stayed. And I just feel like I don't know if two sides of the same coin is the right expression, but I feel like our messages are very aligned. We have different ways of delivering it. You're more on the spiritual side of it. But I feel like, we're just so aligned. So I'm just so happy that you're here to talk because I know that my audience, if they don't already know you, are going to just love your content.
Well, I think the really big part of overlap between both of our all of the videos both of us produce is this idea of breaking through the taboo, these things that are
Mm.
usually not discussed by quote unquote polite society. Like, hey, let's be open about it. Like, we're real human beings. We have bodies. We have sexual desires. We seek connection. We go about seeking that connection in a myriad of ways. Let's be real about it and let's have an open and frank conversation. And I so cherish that and love that you do that.
It's for me, it's the authenticity that it's just these are things that we all talk about. It's all things that we deal with, all things we think about, and so it's the authenticity of being able to talk about it in these spaces. We need to start at the beginning. So you need to explain to us, because obviously your YouTube channel is called Ecstatic Self. So please explain what is the ecstatic self, and what is an ecstatic spirituality coach? What do they do for somebody?
I think one of the things that gives our life meaning and purpose is that experience of awe and wonderment that many of us have a lot of when we're growing up as kids. Like, the world is new and fresh, and we almost tap into that state of ecstasy just by living. And as we get older and more experienced, more jaded, and everything starts to feel really familiar, the colors dull, the excitement fades, and a lot of us move into a life that is very repetitive, very boring, and really trying to recapture that idea of ecstatic living, that you find joy, you find wonderment, you find ecstasy in all of your days, and in many ways, whether that's through sex, through spiritual work, through community, through food, through whatever floats your particular boat on this particular day. But how do we cultivate a sense of living in ourselves that is full of wonderment, joy, and ecstasy?
So it really is what it says.
Yes, very much
Ecstatic
so.
self.
Yeah.
I know you've been very open on your channel about the pretty severe trauma that you experienced as a child, also being part of a cult. So you have a lot of lived trauma. And I'm just wondering, how much do you think that has played in your decision, desire, or need to be a spiritual coach?
I love that you brought up the term the wounded healer early on in the conversation, because I do believe that anybody who's truly attained something of depth to share has had to go through really difficult experiences and not only survive them, but learn to thrive because of them. I think that's a really common trope you hear from most people who've achieved some level of self mastery, self awareness development in a profound and meaningful way, and are then therefore able to help other people. In retrospect, I very much see the challenges I've gone through in my life as being preparatory experiences to help me do what I do today. There's a quote by the poet Khalil Gibran. He does a whole poem on what is joy, what is suffering. And I love the images he uses. I'm paraphrasing this badly, but he says something along the lines of, is not the flute that soothes your soul once a stick that has been hollowed with knives? Is not the cup that holds your wine once burned in the potter's oven? Sorrow cuts a channel in the rock that the river of joy is later able to flow through.
Oh, wow.
And modern brain research is actually showing that your capacity to hold experiences of joy is actually often predicated by how much you've suffered. That by going down and rooting into the depths of the human experience, the human psyche, it then allows us to ascend the heights in a similar way. Now, I think what the challenge is difficult situations don't necessarily make you a better person. We know lots of people who've endured hardship and were completely destroyed by that. I'm not an advocate to say that everyone needs to suffer, but I will say we live in a world where pain is not optional. We will all experience pain to some degree or another as we continue to live. The choice we get to make is, does that pain then crack us open, or does the pain shut us down? And that's the question I always ask myself whenever something uncomfortable enters my reality, my life. Am I going to allow this to make me bitter, jaded, a shell of a human being? Or am I going to allow this discomfort to make me go a little bit deeper, open up a little more fully, and crack open into that person I have the capacity to be? Uh, Paraphrasing the poet Rumi, the pain is the place where the light enters you.
Mm.
This idea that the difficult things that have come before can be gateways to higher knowledge if you choose to see them that way, and if you choose to embrace the discomfort and say, this is a blessing, this is a gift, this is a teacher, and I'm not running from it. I'm going to sit and be with it.
Do you think it's a choice that we have to make? Is it up to somebody who's been through something traumatic to I mean, to take that thing and to make it turn it into something good? Is it a choice that is ours to make?
I think that's the million dollar question. And I'll tell you right now that the research around resiliency, which is basically what you're talking about, your ability to overcome difficulties, is incredibly inconclusive. We don't know
Mm.
why some people are more resilient than others, and we don't necessarily know how to teach people to become more resilient. What I have found in my own personal journey, though, is that yes, there's an element of choice. Yes, there's certainly an element of good fortune and having people and teachers and guides around you that can teach you to deal with those discomforts, those unfortunate situations. But there is an element of, yeah, maybe you're just lucky. Maybe you just have the genetic predisposition to do it. But I will say for myself, the thing that I always go back to is, can I not push away the pain? Can I sit with it? Can
Mm.
I neither pull it tight and make it part of my identity nor try to shove it away, but to just sit with it and say, you are here. Tell me more. Tell me,
Mm.
why did you come into my life? What is the lesson that you are here to teach me? And I'm not going to try to fix you or fade you or banish you. I'm just going to sit with you and listen. And I think that curiosity has served me really, really well as I've moved forward. And taking responsibility for it, even if the things that come into my life, even if that person who hurt me, it felt fully intentional, felt very deliberate, and like, oh, they're just a really angry person. They came after me. To instead just sit with it and say, one, this is independent of them, that They have their own stuff going on. They probably would have done this to anybody who happened to be by. It felt really personal, but it isn't. But where it is personal, the second thing is that we have karma. This idea that we have experiences we have to go through for the lessons we need to learn based on our previous actions. And
Mm.
this person was just the random deliverer of it. It wasn't specific to them. Anyone might have been the bearer of my karma. It could have been another person had I been walking down a different street. But if I say this is a karmic happening, that means that I did something in my past, whether I remember it or not, whether it was this lifetime or not, that made this happen to me. And whether you believe in reincarnation or not, I'm not going to speak to that. Why I like this modality of karma and viewing something as being the result of previous actions is that it allows me to reclaim my power. If I'm just purely the victim, then I have no power in this situation. If
Mhm.
I am the person who called this into my circle of experience, if I am the person who summoned this life lesson, as uncomfortable as it may be, because I need it for my growth and it is due to previous things I have done, then I also then have the power to get myself out of it. And I spent most of my young life wearing victimhood as a badge of honor, saying, woe is me. All these
Mm.
people are doing this to me. It's not fair. It isn't right. And I just realized that that didn't ever get me anywhere. I just then stayed in victimhood. And when I stopped casting the blame on other people and say, yeah, this felt fully random. I had nothing to do with me, but I still am the bearer of this experience. And say, okay, great. What are you here to learn from it? Teach me. You have something you need to show me, show away. It allowed me to start owning my life in a much more proactive way.
You kind of are touching on my next question a little bit because, well, first of all, congratulations on your YouTube success and all of your platforms and everything. But being online is tough. I know that. And considering your past when you were in school, how do you manage online bullies and trolls? Do you have any? Do you get that? And how do
I
you handle that? Is it triggering?
I will say I'm very lucky. Like I have acquaintances and friends who post online and endure much more trolling and bullying than I've ever had to experience in this platform, which I'm deeply grateful for. I will say, in the instances that I have had it, the thing that I really do try to do as best as I can is I know everybody says this and it's not easy, but to just block and ignore. Like you're not going to really sit down and have a heartfelt conversation with anyone. I mean, if somebody was willing, if they were like, "Hey, yeah, I'll jump on a Zoom call with you and let's talk," I'd totally be open for that because I tend to
Mm,
find people are actually pretty reasonable for the most part if you can actually have a real face-to-face conversation. But replying doesn't usually seem to help people change their viewpoint at all. So
mm.
I have definitely dove down the rabbit hole of trying to engage with those individuals, and it definitely doesn't feel like it ever made any progress. So I've just kind of moved on to the idea of block, move forward, ignore. And if someone is open to having a real dialogue, of course, I'm happy to do that. But I don't think it serves anyone really well. And, just frankly, there's so many damn cowards on the internet. Like, if you're going to post a comment, it better be something that you're willing to say to that individual's face if you met them
Mhm.
in person.
It never is. There's no way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to just for myself behave online as if I were in the room with somebody,
Mhm.
and to let that be an example. And I will be quite frank. I generally in my content, even though I talk about controversial things, I generally almost never will post on the topic of confronting something from a negative point of view and
Mhm.
telling someone or some ideology why they're wrong. I usually try to stay in the positive of here's what I think is right and why. And I tend to find that that does deflect a lot more negative experiences than being combative.
That's a great way to be. For me personally, I used to take those negative comments as a teaching moment, and I would try to respond in a, "Hey, what about this perspective?" But it turns out that it's just falling on deaf ears, so now I just ignore. But that was a learning curve for myself, and it was tough. So, but I'm glad that you don't have to deal with that too much. But I want to talk about, you have your channel, you have your books as well, and you have your retreats. Um, I am currently putting something together for my audience, so I understand what it takes to gather people together uh, to come with you to do a retreat. What would you say? Say somebody is watching and they're like, "Oh, this is really resonating with me. I'm interested in this." What would you say to somebody who is afraid maybe the retreat is not for them or that they won't fit in?
First off, congratulations. I was watching your video and your webpage about your upcoming adventure, so I'm very excited for
Oh,
you.
thank you.
I hope it goes great.
Thank you.
Uh, well, to answer your question, for me specifically, is one of the things that I do is if somebody expresses interest in wanting to go, I ask them to jump on a video call with me. So
Mm,
I give them an opportunity to ask me any questions that they want. It also gives me an opportunity to vet them. Like I have everybody turn in an application, just kind of articulating the why and the what around why is this retreat inspiring for you? What about it appeals to you? Why is this the right time? What are you looking for? Especially because I do engage, as you do, with the more sexual side of things.
hmm.
If somebody wants to show up at my retreat looking for a 6 day orgy, they're going to be sorely disappointed.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to vet that. But the other thing is to create that space for people to tell me a little bit about their story and to start to develop that one on one relationship. Because at the end of the day, for neither of us, we are not tour guides, we are not travel experts.
Yeah.
People are coming because they like us, they like our brand, they like the things we talk about, they like the energy we bring, they like our perspectives. And so really it's about the relationship. And if you're somebody who watches either of our channels or anyone else's social media presence and you feel like you vibe with them and you feel like, hey, there's a connection here, there's something I really enjoy, then what do you have to lose to start a conversation? And I'm assuming if somebody reached out to you with that question of like, hey, these are my concerns, these are my hopes, what do you think? I'm sure you'd be more than happy to engage and respond and tell them, yeah.
Yes, and it's funny that somebody would feel that that they wouldn't fit in. It almost breaks my heart a little bit because it's like I try to promote inclusivity in everything that I do and non-judgmental and inclusivity and for people to be carrying around a lot of that, well, childhood trauma and stuff of this feeling of being inadequate, either socially or physically looking. And so to have to try to, tell them, no, you are welcome. This is for you. It's, you know,
And let's be real, gay spaces are not welcoming spaces a lot of the time.
that's
Like
fair.
you go to a gay bar, you go to a gay neighborhood, and people are generally not friendly and welcoming. I remember I was waiting tables one summer, and one of the guys I was working with told me he's like, I recently moved to Boys Town in Chicago, and thought it was going to be like this amazing, like opening, revelatory experience. He's like, my sense of self worth has plummeted
Hmm.
since I moved there, and so I think people have a right to be concerned of saying, hey, if I'm going to invest a lot of my precious time off, my money, my energy, and going on an adventure that is specifically queer, masculine focused, I want to make sure that I feel welcomed in those spaces because gay men can be terrible. Gay men can be some of the most judgmental and prejudiced pricks around.
Yep.
And, you know, it's really important that we create spaces that I'm not a huge fan of the term safe space because I think that's impossible. But I like to say brave spaces. I think we create spaces where people are invited to show up, be authentic, and for that to be celebrated.
Thank you so much for that perspective. I'm glad I asked that question because, um, listen, I'm going to take a little left turn here because I peeked at your not safe for work Twitter account.
Great.
Okay. So I need to ask you a serious question.
Please.
Does having a third leg make it easier or harder to be a nudist?
um, well, I didn't start off that way. I think it's fair enough to say. If you watch my YouTube channel, you'll know that I spent a lot of years invested in trying to make my dick bigger. So
That
I've
was a
I've had a
journey.
range.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a journey. So I've definitely had a range of experiences. Um, There are pluses and minuses with everything in life, right? Like this is something I always try to hold in my own heart and encourage other people is never wish you were somebody else because they have problems you don't ever imagine. Like
That's
you
right.
might look at that person who is like seemingly beautiful and perfect and their life might must be so easy. And it's like, no, no, they have their own set of issues.
Hmm.
So, what are the positives of having a giant penis? Positives are you get a lot of attention. People want to engage with you. Subject of conversation, subject of fascination, status, given a lot of social cred. All really great things. Really challenging things that come with that, especially when you're practicing, let's say, nudism in a non sexualized setting,
Good
is
luck.
the hyperfascination, the hypersexualization, the people feeling like you aren't human, but you are more of an object,
Hmm.
being touched inappropriately, being sexualized without consent. Um, it comes with its own baggage, and I will say that there are plenty of times where I have opted out of naked settings because I felt like a piece of meat and I felt just completely dehumanized, and that
Hmm.
doesn't feel very good. There are moments for sure, yeah, look at my body, sexualize me, that's fine, and there are times where it's like, this doesn't. You feel like you're taking away my humanity.
It's hard to turn that on and off with people.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
I understand what you're saying. Sometimes that's not the point of what this is.
yeah.
Sometimes, and to turn it off for people. On a side note, though, I saw a before and after picture, you as a younger you, and it was still pretty good size. Maybe it's more girthy now, but
Well, that's a few years after I
you
began. So I
started.
mean,
Ah,
yeah, I
okay.
mean, full disclosure. When I started, I was probably somewhere around 7.5 to 8 inches long and about 4.5 inches around. So kind of like pencil dick. And now I'm kind of like 9 by 7.5.
Congratulations.
So that's fun.
Listen, I know you do that a lot of nude meditation, but you work a lot with CEOs of NFL teams, federal
Yeah.
judges, Ivy League professors. Are these people getting nude?
Depends. I will say most of my one-on-one work is fully clothed because the point isn't about being titillated. The
Hmm.
point is about vulnerability. And as we just discussed, that can be a hard distinction for people. Like I just hosted this retreat in February where there was a lot of partner touch, and all of the partner touch work was fully clothed because gay guys, if I said, "Hey, take your dick out and let somebody suck it,"
Yeah.
they'd be totally fine.
Hmm.
But you ask somebody, "Hey, I want you to touch someone, and I want you to allow yourself to be held, and I want yourself to be fully vulnerable, and I want you to stare into somebody's eyes and allow them to see you on a meaningful way." Like we had guys breaking down, we had guys sobbing, we had guys who needed to leave the room because it was too intensely vulnerable. And so it's that kind of fine line between, hey, I want you to open up, I want you to feel free, I want you to experience a greater sense of self and awareness and connection. But it's also really easy when it starts to move into the fully erotic, sexualized space to skip over all that work and to just dive into the sexual. And we know most of the guys who seek sexual connection do it in a bid for finding meaningful connection, for finding a sense of validation, a sense of being seen, a sense of worthiness. Like that's a big part of the reason we have sex. It's not just the pleasure. It's
Hmm.
give me a feeling of worth, give me a sense of belonging. And yet we'll approach sex and at the same time be terrified of connection. And so we do this weird dance of I'll do the most physically intimate thing I can think of. I'll have you shove your forearm up my ass,
Yep.
but at the same time, don't look at me. Don't see me in a certain way.
Hmm.
And so it's getting people to start playing with that boundary a little bit of saying, how do you show up naked and actually be emotionally naked, be actually vulnerable, dare to connect, dare to be brave and allow yourself to be seen. And so it really varies. So the people that you specifically mentioned, have I gotten naked with some of them? Perhaps, yeah. But
Hmm.
that was never the point. The
Yeah.
point was always about how do I live my authentic, open, connected self?
I just had that funny image in my head of an CEO of an NFL team sitting with you nude doing some meditation. I think with gay men specifically, being physically naked is easier than being emotionally naked. And that's
For
probably
sure.
your experience as well, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, look how few successful gay relationships there are.
Hmm.
I mean, I remember when I first started dating my husband, he jokingly said to me, "Oh, we've been together 3 months. That's 3 years in gay terms." You
True.
know, like,
Yep.
and there's some reality to that because I'm a big believer that being born queer is an inherently traumatic experience. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter how open and affirming of a family you grow into. When you're a little kid, before you know that you're gender different or sexual orientation different or any kind of other difference, you know that you're different. You don't necessarily know how, but you know that you're different and you know that
Hmm.
different is dangerous. Different is scary. Different, if we were still tribal hunters and gatherers, could get you excommunicated where you would then be dead. You know,
Hmm.
you wandering alone on a frozen tundra with saber-toothed tigers does not equal life.
Hmm.
And so we start to fear ourselves. We start to say, I don't know what's different about me, but I know different is wrong. I need to hide it. I can't be my authentic self. I need to be something different. And so that internal disconnection starts at a very young age. And oh, it's wonderful to see so many more young people being able to embrace their gender ideology, their sexual orientation at a younger and younger age. That's beautiful. But all of us have that trauma, and many of us don't go on the healing journey to start really digging into that and resolving it. So we're these emotional nutcases with all of these triggers and all of these longings and fears. And then we try to enter intimate relationship with somebody else who's dealing with similar issues. And surprise, surprise, it's really fucking hard.
Hmm.
And so until you really start excavating that internal shit and that internal trauma and start healing from it, it's pretty damn impossible to go into a meaningful, mutually supportive, stable relationship with somebody else. Lord knows, even for me and my husband, we've been together 9 years now this Sunday. And even for us, there are times where it's still really fucking hard. And we're both people who do soulful work all the time.
Well, that's right. And well, congratulations on 9 years. That's like
Thank you.
100 in gay terms. So I'm coming on 8 years in my relationship, and it doesn't. I don't think it gets easier. I think it just morphs. It's not the same relationship that we started with, and I think we're just able so far to navigate the waters. And there's been rough times. There's been times when I'm like, this is it, and then there's good times and there's smooth sailing. And I feel like yeah, I don't know. It's a hard relationships are tough in general. But going back to what we were saying about you know gay people or the queer community, I just feel like when I encounter somebody who's being bitchy or just like cunty or they're just mean to each other or me or whatever, I always flip it and I just look at them as this traumatized little kid that
Hmm.
went through the same, like you said, this trauma, no matter like what, how accepting your family is or anything like that. Society as a whole says, no, you're wrong, you're different. Period.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter. 2 steps forward, 1 step forward, 2 steps back is basically what we've been dancing, is our dance towards like equal human rights and this acceptance on this planet. And especially in today's culture, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just now 1 step forward, 3 steps back. So whenever I encounter somebody who's just really, I just see a really hurt individual and somebody who, you know, I mean, some people are just assholes, but I mean, it helps me in that situation not become angry because I'm like, this person is really hurting,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
also, in addition, I like to remind myself that people's external reality and internal reality often mirror each other. And so, how people treat others is often a reflection of how they treat themselves.
Mm,
And if they're being that cold, cruel, unkind to others, imagine the language they use for themselves, to themselves, inside their own head. And maybe not on a conscious level, but certainly on a subconscious level. Because the people that I want to be around are generally very, very kind individuals. And that kindness for others is often, when you see someone who's done a lot of healing work, comes from this level of compassion for self that I'm not perfect. I'm working on myself. I have areas I'm still improving, but I'm having compassion for myself. I'm being kind to myself. And then I'm allowed to then extend that to other people.
Well, I think that's right. It's what you said earlier when you mentioned, sometimes people comment on my channel. There's, oh, you're so confident. It's just you're always positive. You have everything figured out. Or these kinds of comments, and I'm like, I'm such a work in progress, as we all are. And if that comes across, that's just the healing that I've done and the work that I've done
Yeah,
to try to that you're seeing. So thank you.
same.
But I'm a mess and I have my own insecurities. Trust me. Um, so we're all on our own journey, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. And, similarly, like I project as being a very confident, very calm person, but I can think of two times in the recent past where I've lost my shit because of being really triggered by something.
Yeah.
One was because of meanness I saw going on in the queer community. Like it just made me lose my shit. I hate seeing people being treated with cruelty,
Mm.
especially people who can't defend themselves. I have a really hard time. And then there was somebody thinking they were being cute, but saying something that was really offensive and violating my personal boundaries. And I should have been able to
Mm.
just like laugh it off and been like, oh, no worries. But in that moment, I tore them a new asshole. So,
You heard it here, folks. Kaelan tore somebody a new asshole, and not with his third leg. So, tell me about. I know that you have a retreat. We have a couple more minutes here. So, tell me about you have a retreat coming up this summer.
mhm.
What can folks expect at a Kaelan retreat?
The theme of this retreat is freedom and joy. I like to focus
Mm,
the theme of the retreat around the seasons and what's going on in the world. It's the day after the July 4th holiday in the United States, which I know isn't, we've kind of moved into this time in America where patriotism has taken on an interesting word, and
yeah.
holidays like this tend to have a lot more baggage than they used to. So one of the things that I really try to hold on to with this idea is liberation and freedom that is tangentially associated with July 4th. So bringing that into the retreat, bringing in, we're in the height of summer, the brightest part of the year. So how
Mm,
do we let go of inhibitions? How do we let go of shame? How do we move into that space of ecstasy, that state of freedom, liberation, joy? So retreat activities include everything from meditation, yoga, forest bathing, partnered intimacy work, sharing circles, story circles, um, naked swimming, skinny dipping, ecstatic dancing, sacred artwork creation, like really trying to approach this idea of finding presence, finding joy from a myriad of different avenues.
sign me up. I
You're
love it.
more than welcome, Patrick. We'd love to have you.
Thank you, Kaylin. I'm going to put all of the links to, well, for the retreat, to your YouTube, your socials, links to your books, the website. All of this can be found in the description below. Kaylin, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today on Queerly Us.
It's a sincere pleasure. As I said at the beginning, I was deeply flattered to see your email pop up, and it's lovely to get to connect with you.
Thank you. Well, we'll have to do it again sometime.
Please.
And for the rest of you, I will see you on the next episode of Queerly Us.